Hello, this is Dr Diana Tolmie from the Queensland Conservatorium, Griffith University. Welcome to the Music Livelihoods Knowledge Series 2023. This is a series of 6 sessions that invite people to join me on the journey of exploring musicians' lives. This knowledge series is also tied to the International Music Livelihoods Symposium, which is held online every year. So last session, we discussed sustainability strategies of musicians. They adopt one to many of the following: making choices prioritising health and family, ensuring savings or passive income, a conscious maintenance of one's professional image, be it their reputation and or their self-promotional tools, creating their own work and ensuring at least one element of one's portfolio of work is low risk and holds some financial consistency. For the last, we discussed the strategies and ethos of those that run dual careers. That is, one foot firmly planted in music and the other foot firmly planted in non-music domains, and why they chose not to teach. We also looked at potential positive and negative impacts to one's career, what causes those to consider leaving the profession, and more importantly, to stay. Other strategies we investigated included planning for the now or planning for the future, guided by the megatrends of Dr. Stefan Hakovic. In the end, we found while all decisions are made with financial awareness, in essence, we rely on our natural environment for our music livelihood, which in the end is all about people. This is an appropriate segue to tonight's topic of meaningful music networks. One of the courses I run at the Queensland Conservatorium, Griffith University, is called My Life as a Musician. And one of the assessment tasks requires those enrolled to interview 2 professional musicians. Thus, every year, I hear the storied lives of about 400 musicians from across the globe. One of the prescribed questions is, what advice would you give a current undergraduate musician? And it is very common for the response to be centered on work ethic and opportunity, with statements such as, work hard. Hard work puts you where good luck can find you. Use your time at the con wisely. Embrace every opportunity as it is the most free time and advice you will ever have. But even more so are the comments about one's professionalism and potential impact, for better or worse, on others. Last session, we looked at Professor Ruth Bridgestock's advice for emerging artists, and one pearl of wisdom was, it's who you know, but also who knows you, which implies more than just knowing the right people to get ahead with your music passion and career dreams. It implies that your actions and general visibility, particularly in such a connected world with declining privacy, has greater reach than previously imaginable. Hence, it is never a surprise to hear musicians offer advice to their younger colleagues. The music industry is small. Be nice to everyone. Professional is how you want to be described, not just what you want to be. So the question then bodes, what constitutes being a professional? The classic skills of being autonomous, a team player, punctual and committed to deadlines and timelines, possessing intrapersonal and emotional empathic capabilities, called EQ, being hardworking, able to produce good quality work, and being a generally positive contributor to the workplace are valued in a variety of occupations. But is it enough to be successful? If the music industry and profession is about people, well, then what people? And how does our network function anyway? In 2010, an excellent study was conducted in the Netherlands following 369 aspiring pop musicians over a 3-year period to determine their career trajectories. They identified 4 categories. The first, upward careers. The second, downward careers. The third, stable, successful careers. And the fourth, stable, unsuccessful careers. So the study determined that career success was influenced by their social support, their professional attitude, and their professional network. They further stated that those with successful versus unsuccessful careers, results showed that successful pop musicians experienced more social support, have a stronger professional attitude, and a more extensive professional network. Moreover, that study shows that these findings were consistent both between and within the different career pattern groups. So the question then is, how do we define each of those elements? Well, social support, they defined as the amount of emotional support that individuals receive from family, friends, and peers in their musical activities. They claimed social support has a positive overall impact on career optimism, plays an important antecedent role in the reduction of work-family conflict, and reduces absenteeism, depression, and anxiety, plus increases resistance to burnout. Another name for this is having a strong cheer squad. Professional attitude. This was defined as how much one's music-making activities is perceived as the central activity in their professional careers. That is, the degree of importance that working has to the identity of an individual and the psychological importance of work in the person's life. So, for example, in contrast to an amateur or hobbyist musician, artist, we have a saying regarding self-promotion: be seen, be read, be heard. And the fact in the arts is that you will be seen, read, and heard, but it can be something one can proactively facilitate to develop a professional image you can control. It is never too early to have that website and social media channels, develop active content, have your email signature reflect the musician you are or want to be, have the business card with some basic details at the ready. Some people still value that as a quicker way than clumsily trading phone and email details. Professional network. This factors in the amount of network relationships or social capital is positively related to career success. For musicians, this includes friends, colleagues, teachers, older professionals, persons working at music companies and other media personnel, publishers, booking agents, artist managers, and journalists. Sometimes even politicians, for example, arts ministers. It is not new knowledge that the music network is highly referral-based, but it may come to you as a surprise that it is one of the most referral-based professions. So within my doctoral research, I asked the musicians to reflect on their strategies for gaining their initial versus current work. And it significantly demonstrated that as emerging musicians, there was a strong reliance on the people they knew, with non-music friends and family also playing a part in providing their early employment experiences. Their commentary likewise revealed their undergraduate degree provided an instant peer network with teachers and mentors introducing them to perceived higher quality employment than those their peers initially referred. Even more interesting was that throughout their career, they increasingly relied on their reputation amongst their professional music community, a collective increase by 20%, in fact. Further to this, they relied less on their teachers, mentors, and older experienced musicians for a number of pragmatic reasons related to their own status as a professional musician, but more so because those older networks were, unsurprisingly, diminishing. People retired or discontinued their music work and literally died. The data also revealed that as one's reputation and social capital strengthened, there was less need or opportunity to audition. However, musicians increasingly created their own opportunities over the course of their career. This I find fascinating, as such activity drove the musicians to seek new networks and subsequently generate more connections for their fellow musicians. But as the data shows, this type of initiative was only half as popular as the passive nature of word of mouth. Why? Because of the time and resources it takes to do so and the prohibitive perceived lack of skills. So overall, we can conclude that work was enabled by simply remaining professionally proactive while sustaining a healthy level of reliability, consistency, and mutual respect for one's community of musicians. But is there more to it? We now turn to a well-known business concept, the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. It states that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Think to your own network and professional opportunities. Are there any key people that have been consistent in their endorsement and referral of your work? Or perhaps is there one domain of the industry that has been strongly supportive? Another way to consider this is to reflect on the people you refer work. Has there been some consistency with who you choose to refer over time? Is there one area of work you are more active in and therefore have more capacity to refer others? These are good questions to ask, because when we start to consider our referral habits, we can also consider the ethics of our referral processes. This is really pertinent when advocating for developing and maintaining a diverse and equitable community of professional musicians. So a thing to question is, what are some types of professional diversity should we consider? Well, there's gender, which is not just male and female, but LGBTQ+. There's ethnicity, there's age, and this one is really important for a variety of pragmatic reasons and professional sustainability. It is all too easy to remain within one's age group, and cliques become more strengthened when a significant group has studied together, learned from the same teachers, and then still reside in the city they have graduated from. Musically speaking, it ossifies the art form. The sound and genres will not evolve. Unfortunately, this also does not bode well for the longevity of one's career. For the reasons I have previously outlined, people can leave or retire from the profession and also simply pass away. Without a diverse age group within one's networks, we are at risk of unwittingly limiting our employment options as our career progresses. In Australia, this is usually noticeable from age 50 onwards. Ensuring that our referral process remains age diverse allows younger musicians opportunities and entry through otherwise impenetrable networks, offers those in their mid-careers a form of sustainability, and overall fosters a sense of communal respect that transcends the stigma of ageism. It also allows those with deep knowledge and experience to remain in the profession, benefiting not just the preservation, but the evolution of the art form. People with disability and those who are neurodiverse are thankfully becoming further recognised and no longer invisible. But I believe to date, the music industry has a long way to go to acknowledge their professional needs. This will only be attended to if our referral practices are inclusive of these types of musicians. Now, some of you may be thinking, this is all well and good, but I prefer that good musicians, irrespective of their gender, age, ethnicity, and accessibility. And this is where we enter the topic of quality versus equality. It is absolutely no good recommending someone for work that they do not remotely have the skills to successfully achieve good outcomes. This is worse for minority groups, for example, women, as the failed outcome represents those in their community. However, in our profession, musicians thrive and learn in situ, and in any profession, there will always need to be a first. Future musicians will find it harder to envision their life if there are no role models. You can't be it if you can't see it. It is a fine line to walk, and my personal advice is that if you are advocating for those musicians in minority groups, also take the time to mentor them to set them up for success. But back to the numbers. We've discussed the Pareto principle and the likely possibility over the duration of your career, there will exist a core bunch of people who are your advocates. This also then begs the question, is there a finite number of people in our professional network? We look to another concept called Dunbar's number. Now, Dunbar's number is a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain social, stable relationships. Relationships in which an individual knows who each person is and how each person relates to every other person. Dunbar described it as the number of people you would not feel embarrassed about joining uninvited for a drink if you happen to bump into them in a bar. This was taken on by commercial businesses, so much so that some designed workplaces to support only 150 car parks. In later publications, he asserted that there exists an inner core of about 5 people to whom we devote about 40% of our available social time, and 10 more people to whom we devote another 20%. All in all, we devote about 2/3 of our time to just 15 people. Similar to this, in Angela Miles Beeching's book, Beyond Talent, she similarly suggests there exists an inner circle, 5 to 10 closest friends, colleagues, who often act as a personal advisory board. An intermediate circle made up of colleagues, former teachers, classmates, and family friends, and an outermost circle which consists of social media friends and casual acquaintances. She also asserts that in the interest of employment and audience development, we should be seeking to convert those from the outermost circle to the intermediate and so on. A good starting point for a market strategy, however, Dunbar's number and the Pareto principle would suggest this may not be cognitively possible. Thus, depending on your genre, domain of music making, time and energy may be better spent elsewhere, particularly when one's initial audience is made up of what we call friends, family, and fools. When relating the topic of developing one's employment network, we can turn to further social science research for insight. So, a fun question: how long do you think it takes the average human to form a first impression? Psychology researchers Willis and Todorov found that it takes just 1/10 of a second for people to judge someone and make that first impression. Another fun question: when you meet someone new, what are the first questions or thoughts that run through your mind? Well, when meeting someone new, 2 questions people will always ask themselves consciously or subconsciously is, do I like you? And do I respect you? In addition to the words that come out of our mouth, there are visual cues, body language, the clothes we wear, and a variety of other things that we unwittingly take into consideration when we first meet someone, let alone work with them. Therefore, it's no surprise there is another musician adage: look nice, play nice, be nice, and smell nice. That last one is more of a deal breaker than you think. Research has been conducted where the introduction of a bad smell has influenced negatively people's ability to form accurate opinions and decisions. Enough said. It also goes without saying that being one's authentic self is vital, and for musicians we find this very easy as our passion positively defines our actions to a certain extent and is something that contributes to our ability to create meaningful connections. In her book Presence, Amy Cuddy notes that we put our faith in people who project passion and enthusiasm because these are traits that cannot be faked. Essentially, people will only want to work with those they know, like, and trust, which are qualities that far outrank music capability. I do know that many of my own colleagues have a no idiot policy, irrespective of the musician's talent. This brings me to the topic of proactive versus subconscious networking. Subconscious, where the sheer nature of our music making is the equivalent of networking. Therefore, the question remains, do we really need to be proactively networking? Well, there's a saying in the profession, let instruments speak, not mouth. This is a phrase I had initially heard from one of my undergraduate lecturers during the 1990s, a British timpanist who had worked in the London Philharmonic Orchestra for several years. The meaning was clear: let one's work speak for itself. All other methods of self-promotion are distasteful. Many musicians will tell you that technical excellence as a musician is only half of it. That is, one needs to be proactively seeking new networks, particularly if one is creating their own music and their own opportunities. Think jazz musician, composer, singer-songwriter, for example. Yet this abhorrence for conscious networking and self-promotion exists, is a part of the identity threat we discussed in previous sessions, and can also be more evident in certain genders. One study involving 64 in-depth interviews with female classical musicians residing in London and Berlin concluded they were reluctant to engage with self-promotion as it was perceived as pushy, unartistic, threatening to future employment, and likened to prostitution. In short, the word networking can be perceived as a dirty word that implies a self-serving and insincere approach to creating opportunity, which in truth, this can happen. Another thing to question is, what other reasons do you think people view the term networking negatively? As a professional musician, I have observed an art for art's sake ideology versus a commercial approach to one's career. While the two are not independent, I find these opposing perceptions lie at the crux of career development, music education, employability, and industry health. Arts for art's sake was the slogan of the bohemian culture in the mid-19th century, when artists were not motivated by profit and had retaliated against insubordinate approaches to the listening of music. This initial music as function evolved from the preceding agricultural age, summarised by O'Reilly and colleagues, as when the professional musician enjoyed a varied and increasing professional status. The subsequent industrial age further developed the concept to music as product with the sale of sheet music and a rise of publishing houses. This coincided with a change in audience demands for silence during performance and between musical movements, an additional perspective of music as art. These values led to the stereotype of the artist as starving, deviant, alcoholic, suicidal, undiscovered genius, which Bradshaw and colleagues described as a romantic musical intention. Commercialisation was further embedded within the profession with the introduction of recording technologies and the sale of physical music products, which created a wealth of new types of professional music industry and employment. Becker's study of jazz musicians identified a close-knit art community from the 1920s, which felt segregated from other areas of society and music making. The act of going commercial was viewed as selling out by professional colleagues. Holbrook described this art versus commerce debate as those who fancied themselves connoisseurs ready to hurl accusations of Philistinian at the plebeian tastes of the hoi polloi. Gosh, what a mouthful. While those who support the dignity of the common man defensively attacked their critics with charges of elitism. So this argument has been exacerbated by the digital age reformation of the music industry to include a less tangible and a more widely accessible product, otherwise described as music as experience. So I have encountered this sentiment many times throughout my career, and it would appear to still be prevalent amongst established musicians in Australia. From my own research, the surveyed musicians' commentary on sustainability practices reflected their high priority on maintaining a high standard of work and maintaining professionalism well over nurturing my networks. As a result, when asked what method they chose to seek out work, many interviewed musicians of my study responded that they waited for the phone to ring or expressed that their deliberate employment-seeking strategies made them uncomfortable. Given that these are established musicians who have worked in the field for at least 20 years, one can safely assume that networks have been well established, enabling ongoing work. These musicians also built their careers in a time when, by their own admission, there was more work available and it was easier to develop a reputation based on one's performance. It was an organic process, a byproduct of the nature of music making. One interview participant also placed value on his network and the say yes mindset, but realised that for his most recent addition to his portfolio career, which was video game design, he may have to reconsider his processes and be more strategic and less fatalistic. So to consider, if we replace the word networking with making meaningful connections, what are some ethically sound ways to consciously do so? Be seen. By simply creating one's own events leads to multiple opportunities to be seen, read, and heard. There are promotion opportunities abound, and it is a way to connect with one's community face-to-face and online. Joining associations, attending the events of others, attending events like these, it all makes a difference. Be read. Media, blogs, websites, email newsletters, online forums, all readily accessible and virtually free. Be heard. All of the above. But also advocate for others. Part of the mutual respect we create in relationships is born out of trust and the support that comes from positively contributing to create a better professional environment. So for some, this be seen, be read, be heard mantra is challenging. In some ways, we do not want to decouple our professional and personal identity, or can't, and it unsurprisingly grates our moral compass. In my study, I found that some felt they simply were not good at it, calling it playing the game, and owing to their perfectionist musician mindset, simply did not want to engage in something they were not good at. A slight change of topic, but no less relevant to the topic of networking, is the value of your name, particularly when referring to others and the responsibility we have in ensuring others' referrals do not disappoint. I recall very early in my career being very excited to hear the words, "You have been referred to me by insert person," and the person was a well-respected musician. In many ways, I was an extension of this person's ability and reputation, otherwise known as the halo effect, and I worked hard to ensure that that remained so. I often hear positive and negative feedback about other musicians, and particularly of those who are young, emerging musicians. So what questions do you think are commonly asked in those scenarios? There are three. Where did they study? Who is their teacher? And most importantly, who referred them? So for any musician, once the gig, event, project is over, it is very rational to ask oneself, do I want to work with this person again? So when you hear the words, "you're only as good as your last gig," it's not just about the musical capability. Another thing to think about when we do refer others, it needs to be with a conscious understanding of how that person represents yourself and your own networks. They are literally trading on your name and your community, which does need to be protected. And if current media has taught us anything, bad news travels quicker than the good. Another thing to consider is that when you refer others, you are indirectly referring their networks. To illustrate, you recommend someone for a performance role in an ensemble, but early in the project they are sick. Usually they will refer someone within their network to replace them. This cause and effect has been largely initiated by your first recommendation. Referrals have direct and indirect impact. So in summary, networking, or whatever word you want to call it, organically occurs within the music profession. We do need to uphold healthy referral practices for the sake of the health of the professional community, but also the sustainability of our own profession. We need to be mindful of the value of our own good name and how it can help others. We also need to be mindful that for most areas of the profession, particularly freelance, a passive approach to networking will only get you so far. Therefore, for those that perhaps still feel a little bit icky about proactively engaging with the be seen, be read, be heard mantra, rather than adopt an arts for art's sake approach, think about it as a smart for art's sake by following these basic principles. Make sure all of your outward-facing activity aligns with your healthy career values. Ensure that you celebrate the success of others' work. The rising tide lifts all boats. Show gratitude to those that referred you. Pay it forward. Give that person the break that otherwise would not have happened. Crack the door wider. You'll be glad you did when you're older. Don't compare or be jealous of those succeeding in your community. Be inspired. Think simultaneously in individualistic and collectivist mindsets. Your actions can positively affect the health of the whole profession and subsequently the industry. Thank you for listening. The next session discusses the musician's value. For some, it is easy to categorize the music profession as a hobby. Musicians make it seem so easy, they're having a lot of fun, and the profession is unregulated compared to others such as health sciences and law. It is not hard to overlook musicians' years of training and dedication, their contribution to societal arts, culture and well-being, national identity, and of course the economy, largely because of much of their preparation is isolated, that is not publicly visible. This final session draws on the research of music livelihood and arts scholars regarding musicians' contribution to the broader society and further discusses educational strategies to advocate for musicians' value.